Matt Ducey.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise in support at the second reading of the Children, Young Persons and Their Families Advocacy, Workforce and Age Settings Amendments Bill. I think as Deputy Chair of the Social Services Select Committee, Mr Speaker, this is a good bill that's coming back from the Select Committee stage. We're bringing in a range of amendments, basically to bring this bill in to support the framework for the new Government Ministry for Vulnerable Children. And I think it was very clearly laid out the reasons behind this bill from the Minister, the issues preceding this bill, the recommendations made by the expert panel are well traversed in the history behind it, Mr Speaker. So I won't be covering much of that, but just to say that we talk about modernising the child, youth and family, but very much this is a major root and branch review and a root and branch reform, ultimately supporting some of the most vulnerable young people we have in New Zealand, Mr Speaker. Because when I think about the expert panel's recommendations, one phrase came and sprung out to me. There was a comment made that we did not know if we were causing more harm by removing the young person from their family and putting them in care. We did not know if we were causing them less harm. And I think that's something that resonated quite strongly with me, Mr Speaker. As when you look at these vulnerable children and young people, the statistics, 7 out of 10 young people in care will leave school with no qualifications. 8 in 10 leave without NCA level 2 or equivalent, and that's 2 times higher than the general population. 90% of these young people in care, Mr Speaker, will go on to be on the benefit by age 21. That's 2.5 times the general population. 4 in 10 young women will be on a benefit with a child by the age of 21. That's 4 times the general female population. And for young men, Mr Speaker, 6 in 10 young men will have a correction sentence by the age of 21, 5.5 times the general male population. And with young people, young men in care, a staggering 21% will have received a custodial sentence. That's 11.5 times higher than the general male population, Mr Speaker. So I just want to acknowledge the work of our very efficient and effective Select Committee Chair, Alfred Naro, who I think has steered this bill through the submission process. But I do want to acknowledge all the Select Committee members, cross-party from around the House. I think the time in Select Committee hearing the submissions was very collaborative, was very productive, and ultimately brings this bill back into the House with a few amendments in good shape. We received 22 submissions, and not a lot of submissions. I think it demonstrates the overall support for this bill out with the people of New Zealand. 16 of them were from organisations, 6 of them were from individuals, 11 submissions were heard orally. Every submission, Mr Speaker, was in favour of the intent of this bill. There wasn't one submission that was not in favour of the intent. So that's a good place to be, and it's a good place to bring this bill back with some minor amendments. 3 amendments I want to touch on in the second reading, Mr Speaker. The first one was to change the date of commencement from the 31st of March next year to the 1st of April 2017. And that's just to align this bill with the new operating model in place for the government's new Ministry for Vulnerable Children. The second amendment is going to allow greater participation for young people and provide better clarity. We talk of young people being involved in some of their care meetings and family group conferences. The amendment under Section 11 will allow and provide for children and young people to be involved in the preparation and planning meetings as well, so they can voice their concerns, their interest and their intent in the planning and preparation meetings of their family group conference. It also allows for support workers. The amendment under Section 11 will give greater clarity for support workers to be involved in those preparation meetings. They will be for young people who might, because of their age, might be a barrier to understanding the process. It might be around the translation services with languages involved or a disability. And finally, Mr. Speaker, Section 7 we're going to amend around sub-delegation, as the previous speaker spoke about. Part of this bill is talking about the delegation of the Chief Executive to an appropriate professional. That might end up being a manager who won't be undertaking that activity. So the bill will now allow a sub-delegation to an appropriate qualified professional. That will need to be publicised publicly as well as be freely available in the Chief Executive's office. So overall, Mr. Speaker, a great bill that lands in a good place with the amendments and sets up for the government's new Vulnerable Children's Ministry. Thank you.
Speaker.
Comment.